Hi, this is Eric from Cafe Watercolor. Welcome to another painting demo. Today I want to share with you the quick process of my paint. Today I want to share with you the quick process of this painting of my friend Anna. And let's just jump into it. So Anna is somebody I met through Instagram. And as you can see from the photo, she is a very beautiful girl. So she shared this photo of her leaning on a sculpture. This is probably a bronze sculpture. And I thought that it was really, really beautiful. As much as the bronze sculpture is the artwork, I actually feel like she is more beautiful and more like an artwork to me in this image. So I decided to paint this. So the goal for this painting is to put a spotlight on her face, so to speak. What I mean by that is that even though I am going to paint her face, her body, and actually the bronze sculpture, her face will be the focus of the painting. Everything else are there just to attenuate the focus of the subject that I want to bring viewers' attention to. So I start out with a line drawing. This drawing is actually quite extensive because I wanted to record the full process from start to finish for my art community on Patreon. Some of my members want to learn how to paint portrait, but I cannot show how to paint portrait without showing the basic structure of the head. So this is why this drawing seems to be a little bit almost an overkill for the size of the head in this painting. But it just goes on to show that how important it is to understand the structure of the face in order to do a decent portrait painting. Doing portrait is always a passion of mine since I was maybe around high school years, because I read a lot of comics and manga and the character always draws me in. So I wanted to do portrait, and I think it's always one of the best way to show my love to the people around me by doing a portrait of them. So I can understand when a student really want to get into portrait painting. But oftentimes they want to skip over the fundamental part of doing a portrait, which is structures, proportion, alignment, things that are a little bit more dry and almost feels constrained. But it's important to understand those in order to do a believable portrait painting. So if you want to get into portrait drawing and portrait painting, be patient and prepare to do quite a bit of studies, drawings, and so on. I've done hundreds of head drawings and paintings, and I still mess up from time to time. And as you can see, I erase part of the drawing and readjust the placement of her eyes. Like I mentioned over and over again in my previous videos, I am not a natural when it comes to doing drawing. There are times that I miss the mark, and I will have to really double check, triple check, and make sure that everything looks good before I start to do the painting. So be patient and practice fundamental. It will always pay off later. So in this case, I spent quite a bit of time doing the drawing for the portrait, and the more time I spend on making it look good and making it accurate, the better time I'm going to have when I'm doing the painting. I'm going to feel more liberating when I'm doing washes and mixing different colors because I get the drawing done. I don't have to worry about them anymore when I'm doing the painting. So when I'm painting, I can just focus on values, colors, and shapes. And I cleaned up my line drawing a little bit so that I don't have a lot of graphite that's going to melt and make my wash dirty when I'm starting to do my first wash. I use a little bit of masking fluid for the highlight of her eyes and the tip of her nose. And that's pretty much it. So here comes the first wash. The first wash is just the overall skin tone. And I use a damp brush, lift some of the paint. And I also do some wet on to wet, so you got a basic light value with a little bit of volume and hints of light and dark. And while doing that, I also start to give the first wash for her blonde hair. I'm not worried about the color blending with each other because they are very, very light. And the first wash is usually quite wet, so when they dry, it's going to be much lighter than they first appear to be. So focus on create a clean wash. That is way more important than trying to get some details and leaving out whites in the beginning of the painting. So I just go ahead and start to do the first wash for the arm and the hand as well, just because they share the same color. And now the face wash is pretty much dry, so I can start my middle value and start to define the facial features. I usually like to start with the eye, so starting from the shadow of the upper eyelid to the iris, and I start to paint outward into the eye socket and connect that shape to the lower eyelid, the side of the nose, and so on. The key is to connect the shape as much as possible. You want to have a very unified shape on her face instead of trying to paint separate shape for the eye, for the nose, for the lips. So oftentimes I may paint a shape or two and soften the edges with a damp brush and maybe use a little bit of water to connect the two shapes together. So as you can see, even though I start with the eye, that shape actually connect to all of the dark side of her face. And saying dark side doesn't mean that the value is dark. It's actually a middle value, maybe even a little bit lighter, because it's just the part that the light is not directly hitting. So it's still pretty light and bright because all of the ambient light, but it's just a slightly darker than the faces in the plane that are lit by the light source. So be a little bit light-handed when you are painting a portrait. Don't emphasize on the dark too much. You just need enough to show the structure of the face. Now I'm painting the lip, the upper lip and the lower lip, and I leave some edges unpainted and soften one of the edge so that it connects with the shape as well. I want her lips to belong to the face, not to feel like a sticker stick on the face. And I continue that middle value down to her neck and to define the muscle on her neck, the collarbone, just bring out the structure. So as you can see, I paint out the shape and I soften some of the edges with a damp brush. So you feel the transition from light to middle value, and that shows the form turning. So you can already start to see the structure of her face by just adding another value. So I go ahead and start to paint her hair as well. And as always, I like to give a shot of blue on the hair just because I like that color a lot. And if you look at the photo, her hair in the dark area does have a little bit of the cool tone to it. So putting some blue to it actually is not that far off. So the painting has come together rather quickly comparing to the drawing. And that is because I spend quite a bit of time drawing. So when I'm painting, I know exactly where to paint each shape. Now there are some shapes that I still need to observe the photo in order to know where exactly to paint the edges and stuff. But overall, I know the position of each feature, and I don't need to second guess myself when I'm painting them. Taking off the masking fluid, revealing the highlight, and on to the third wash of the face. And now we are painting the dark, so the eyebrow, the eyelash, and some darker shadow on her face brings out the bridge of her nose, make her eye sockets deeper. So pretty similar to the second wash, we paint the shape and we extend that and we try to connect some of the darker shapes, but this time the shapes are smaller and they are all within the big shape of the second wash. So with each wash, each layer, we build up the portrait. We make the structure more three-dimensional, and we push the contrast just a little bit more. So I add some more value to the nose, the tip of the nose, make it warmer. And now the lips, make the upper lip a little bit darker, and the corner of her lips, I added a little bit of the shadow. Now the bottom of her lips, and I bring that shape out and lose the edge to the big shape. So it still feels like I have one big major shape, but within that shape we have different varieties of values. But don't lose the overall big shape and the relationship of the value. A little bit more hint to the other side of her face. And now I add some more dark to the hair. This will bring out the light on her skin. When we have a bigger area of dark shape, it's going to make the whole painting feels a lot more anchored down, sort of speak. Like I mentioned before, if we compare painting to a piece of music, dark value is like having bass and having beats. If you've done it right, it can create rhythm and stability to your painting, just like the music. But it's very important to take a look at your painting in the distance, lean back a little bit, step back a little bit, once in a while, just to see how the whole painting is holding up. Sometime when you have enough, it's good to stop because it's very easy to overwork if you are trying to get too much into the detail. And if you overwork a watercolor painting, it's going to look more dirty and it's going to look less fresh. And that's not something that you want. So I stopped working on the face and start to move down to her white t-shirt. I'm using a cool gray for the dark side of the white t-shirt and I'm keeping them very loose. And as you can see, I'm just painting a bunch of shapes and start to soften the edges. The edges that are towards the light side, they should be softened a little bit. And here I pre-wet her chest area so I can have a soft edge. Down to the bronze sculpture. And I'm starting to mix the bronze color and mix that into the t-shirt. Because the light of the bronze actually reflected on her t-shirt. So I want to have a little bit of that color on her t-shirt. And I also want to connect them. Even though they are two different things, but by connecting them, we can feel a little bit more atmosphere in the painting. And like I said, I want everything else to attenuate her face so that the viewer can focus on her face. Everything else are just there to support. So I'm keeping the sculpture and her shirt very loose and connected. The facial feature for the sculpture are just some wet onto wet darker shapes. And I added some cool colors on the side. And that makes the material of the sculpture more believable without adding more details. Adding some more warm, darker tones, wet onto wet. And we leave that sculpture be. I think we have enough detail and form. Painting her hand. Most of her hand and her forearm is blocked by the sculpture, so we don't need to paint that much. Now back to her t-shirt, I'm just going to go ahead and add some more darks. And there's some text on her t-shirt in the photo. I'm not going to paint those because they are just going to be a distraction. Painting some dark shadow between her collar of her t-shirt to her neck. It's a very simple visual language to create more sense of space and dimensionality for the painting. And also use some value to separate her left arm to her body. And her left arm is way too light, so I just give it a glaze, make it darker. And I go ahead and paint her blue jeans. And we just let the color blend together, wet onto wet. So we got some nice lost and found shapes in the bottom of the painting. So that way when your eyes goes down to the bottom of the painting, it fades off pretty naturally. Now I erase some of the pencil line now that the painting is dry, and I start to paint the background. I want to create some backgrounds just so that I can bring out the light. Because if the background is completely white, you actually don't feel the sense of light. So you need to have a little bit of the darker background. to bring out the light. So now as you can see with the background in, I can really show the light on her hair, on her white t-shirt, and on her arm. So the painting actually feels brighter when you start to paint the white light. Here is the finished painting. Again, the full demo is in my Patreon. You can definitely check it out. The full painting demo is about an hour, 40 minutes long, so it's pretty extensive. That being said, I hope you have a wonderful day wherever you are. This is Eric from Cafe Watercolor. I will see you again next time.